There's a pattern in history that has taken down three global superpowers in the last 500 years. And in 2025, the United States is moving through that same pattern step by step, decision by decision, as if we're following the exact script that led to disaster every single time before. In 1590, Spain was the richest empire on Earth. It controlled half the world's gold and silver. Its military dominated Europe. Its currency worked everywhere. Within 80 years, it was bankrupt, a second-rate power that never recovered. In 1914, Britain ruled the largest empire in human history. The sun never set on British territory. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. Within 40 years, the empire was gone. The currency broke. Britain became America's junior partner. In 1991, the Soviet Union stood as the other superpower. Nuclear weapons, global reach, satellites across the planet. And it vanished in 900 days. Not from war, from economic implosion. 3 times. 3 superpowers. 3 total collapses, all following the same sequence. And here's the part you're not supposed to ignore. The United States has already moved through 5 of the 7 stages. We're not nearing the pattern. We're deep inside it. This is how empires die, why they always insist they're different, and why the math says we're next. And it's unfolding faster than anyone wants to admit. Before we break down the sequence, you need to understand what collapse actually looks like. Not in theory, in practice. What it means when a superpower fails. It doesn't start with invasion. It starts with exhaustion. An empire stretches further than it can sustain. Bases in 150 countries. Wars on multiple fronts. Promises it can't keep. Debts it can't repay. At first, the decline is invisible. The currency still functions. The military still wins. The government still reassures. But underneath, the structure fractures. Resources drift. Production contracts. Talent leaves. Then the slide accelerates. Allies hedge. Rivals test limits. Trade partners seek alternatives. Reserve currency status weakens. And suddenly the advantages that made you dominant become liabilities. A currency once demanded worldwide is sent back home. A military spread across the globe becomes unsupportable. Promises once backed by power turn into empty words. That's not theory. That's Spain. That's Britain. That's the Soviet Union. And they did exactly what we're doing. They assumed their strength was permanent. They expanded too far. They corrupted their money. And they denied reality until collapse was already in motion. Now let's break down how the pattern unfolded. 3 times, in the exact same order. Let's start with the first global empire, Spain, from the 1500s into the 1600s. This is where the template was born. After Columbus reached the Americas in 1492, Spain didn't just expand. It became the planet's first truly international power. They crushed the Aztec and Inca states and took possession of the richest precious metal deposits the world had ever seen. By 1550, Spanish ships were unloading 200 tons of silver every year. By 1600, the flow had doubled. Spain effectively dictated Europe's money supply. The Spanish real functioned as the reserve currency. Everyone wanted Spanish silver. And this is where the pattern begins. A nation holding the world's money and assuming that makes it untouchable. Philip II, ruling from 1556 to 1598, commanded more wealth than any monarch before him. And he poured it into expansion. Stage 1. Military overreach. Spain fought on nearly every front imaginable, against the Ottomans in the Mediterranean, against France and Italy, against Protestant uprisings in the Netherlands, against England at sea, and in campaigns from the Philippines to the Americas. By 1580, Spain was tied to conflicts on 4 continents. The bill was crushing. Half of all state revenue disappeared into the military, and it still fell short. Stage 2. Weakening the currency. Tax income couldn't keep up, so the crown turned to the classic move of a declining empire. It diluted the coinage. Copper was mixed into what had been pure silver. First small amounts, then half, then most of the coin. The stamped value stayed the same, but the metal was worthless. By 1600, Spanish coins carried almost no silver at all. Merchants refused to honor them. Prices surged out of control. Stage 3. The debt trap. Spain borrowed relentlessly, from Italian banks, German banks, any lender available. By 1557, less than 20 years after Philip took the throne, Spain defaulted. It renegotiated, borrowed again, and defaulted again in 1560. again in 1575, again in 1596, 4 defaults in 40 years. Each time, promises of reform. Each time, spending resumed exactly as before. Stage 4, the collapse of productive strength. This is the part most people miss. Spain's downfall wasn't caused by a lack of money. It was caused by having too much. When gold arrives without effort, work stops. Farming declined. Shipbuilding faded. Innovation stalled. The nobility treated labor as beneath them. Wealth poured out of Spain to buy luxuries from abroad. Silver came in from the Americas and flowed straight out to France, Italy, and the Netherlands. Spain became a pipeline, not a producer. By 1600, the empire manufactured almost nothing. It relied completely on imports and on silver shipments to pay for them. Once the mines slowed and output fell, the entire system buckled. Stage 5, social breakdown. As the economy deteriorated, crime soared. Madrid filled with beggars. Productive citizens left. The brightest minds moved to France, England, or the Netherlands, places that were building, inventing, expanding. Spain was left with officials, soldiers, and clergy. No creators, only consumers. By 1640, Portugal broke away. By 1650, the Netherlands, Spain's wealthiest possession, was gone. By 1700, the empire survived only on paper. Spain fell from global dominance to a minor European state in under a century, and it never returned. Today it's pleasant, cultured, and irrelevant in global power. The heirs of the conquistadors live off tourism. That is what an imperial collapse looks like. Let's move ahead 3 centuries. Britain in the early 1900s, the empire where the sun never set. At its height, Britain controlled a quarter of the planet's land and ruled over 400 million people. The pound sterling served as the world's reserve currency. Every major trade agreement was written in pounds. Every central bank held British debt. London functioned as the financial capital of the world. And just like Spain centuries earlier, Britain assumed this position would last forever. But the sequence had already begun. Stage 1, military overreach. By 1900, Britain was tied to commitments across the globe: India, Africa, the Middle East, China, the Pacific, the Caribbean. 6 continents to defend. The cost was crushing. And when World War I broke out in 1914, Britain faced a decision: stand aside and let Europe tear itself apart, or enter the conflict and bankrupt the empire to win. They chose war. World War I drained more than $40 billion. That's roughly $1 trillion in today's terms. They borrowed from everyone, mainly from the United States. By 1918, Britain owed America billions. The creditor had become the debtor, but they had won. They kept the empire. They believed they could rebuild. They were wrong. Stage 2, currency dilution. The pound was supposed to be backed by gold, but the war had stripped Britain's reserves. They had shipped gold to the U.S. to pay for weapons, food, and supplies. By 1920, their gold stockpile was half of what it had been before the war. Even so, they tried to hold the pound's old value. In 1925, they returned to the gold standard at the pre-war rate. The problem was simple: the pound was overpriced. British exports became uncompetitive. Factories slowed. Unemployment rose. And the government kept interest rates high just to defend the currency. It crushed the domestic economy. By 1931, they couldn't maintain the illusion. Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound dropped 25% overnight. The global reserve currency had just admitted it couldn't keep its promises. Stage 3, the debt spiral. Britain never recovered from World War I's debt load. Then World War II began, another $120 billion in costs, more borrowing from America. By 1945, Britain owed the U.S. and Canada over $30 billion, more than the country's entire GDP. They won the war, but the empire was over. They could not defend it, could not afford it, could not sustain it. Stage 4, the breakup of the empire. In 1947, Britain lost India, the crown jewel, the foundation of 2 centuries of wealth. Over the next 2 decades, the rest fell away. Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean. By 1970, the British Empire existed only in memory. Stage 5, currency decline. The pound kept sinking. In 1940, 1 pound was worth $4.03. By 1950, $2.80. By 1970, $2.40. By 1980, around $2.30. Today, roughly $1.27. The reserve currency of the world had shrunk into a regional currency. Britain tried to maintain the image, a permanent UN Security Council seat, nuclear weapons, a special relationship with the US. But everyone understood the reality. They were a former power, a museum of what once ruled the world. The empire was gone, and it never returned. Now let's examine the most recent case, the Soviet Union from 1945 to 1991. After World War II, the USSR rose as a superpower. Nuclear arsenals, a massive military, dominance over Eastern Europe, satellites in orbit. They believed they represented the future. Communism, they claimed, would outlast capitalism. Their system would conquer the world. For 45 years, they matched America. Tank for tank, missile for missile, soldier for soldier. But underneath the surface, the economy was already rotting. Stage 1. Military overreach. The Soviet Union poured 15 to 20% of its GDP into the military, 3 times America's share. They tried to mirror U.S. technology, U.S. reach, U.S. alliances, but on an economy far smaller. They fought in Afghanistan, subsidized Cuba, backed Syria, Vietnam, North Korea, Angola, Ethiopia. Wherever the U.S. moved, they felt compelled to respond. The strain was impossible to sustain. Stage 2. Economic stagnation. Growth flatlined in the 1970s. Oil revenue kept the system breathing, but everything else was failure. Factories turned out unusable goods. Farms collapsed. Technology fell decades behind. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union, a nation with vast fertile land, was importing grain. Why? Because central planning destroys initiative. Because innovation dies under command. Because no one works harder when nothing is earned. Stage 3. Currency breakdown. The ruble was never a true currency. It couldn't be exchanged abroad. Even Soviet citizens avoided it when possible. People used dollars whenever they could get them. To buy foreign products, the government had to rely on gold and oil because nobody accepted rubles. By 1985, oil prices had crashed. Gold reserves were dwindling. They were running out of real money. Stage 4. The loss of empire. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Eastern Europe peeled away. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany, gone within a year. The satellites that gave the USSR strategic depth vanished almost overnight. Moscow was powerless to stop it. They were broke. Stage 5. Complete collapse. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union disappeared. 900 days from the fall of the Berlin Wall to total dissolution. No foreign invasion. No battlefield defeat. Just internal economic failure. The military couldn't be paid. The government couldn't function. The ruble became worthless. A superpower with 30,000 nuclear weapons disintegrated from within. The sequence repeated again. Overextension, stagnation, currency failure, the loss of empire, collapse. And here's what should keep you awake at night. America maintains more than 750 bases in around 80 countries. We have troops in roughly 150 nations. We're pledged to defend Europe through NATO, to defend Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, to fight in the Middle East, to counter China, to counter Russia. Our official defense budget sits near $850 billion a year, more than the next 10 countries combined. And it still isn't enough. We're stretched thin. Hardware is aging. Recruiting is falling. And we've taken on obligations we cannot actually meet. If China moves on Taiwan, if Russia pushes deeper into NATO territory, if Iran shuts the Persian Gulf, we can't handle all of it at once. We are overextended. Just like Spain, just like Britain, just like the USSR. Check. Stage 2. Currency debasement. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar became pure fiat. Since 2000, the money supply has grown by roughly 400%. Since 2020 alone, we've created over 6 trillion new dollars. Since 1971, the dollar has lost nearly all of its purchasing power. We're not slipping copper into silver coins. We're just printing claims on nothing. Different method, same outcome. The money is being diluted. Debasement, check. Stage 3, the debt spiral. The United States owes about $36 trillion. That's around 120% of GDP. Interest payments alone are closing in on $1 trillion per year. We now spend more servicing debt than on defense. We run deficits every year, about $1.8 trillion in 2024, during a growing economy. In peacetime, we borrow to pay interest on previous borrowing. That is the textbook definition of a debt spiral. Spain defaulted 4 times. Britain borrowed until the empire snapped. The Soviet Union simply ran out of funds. We're on the same track. Check. Stage 4. Loss of productive capacity. America barely manufactures. We design, we finance. We consume. We outsource the rest. Our industrial base has been gutted, moved to China, Mexico, Vietnam. Every year we import roughly $800 billion more than we export. We rely on foreign supply chains for almost everything: pharmaceuticals, electronics, steel, even critical components for our own weapon systems. Just as Spain became dependent on imports while silver poured out, we're dependent on imports while dollars pour out. And like Spain, if that flow of money is disrupted, we're exposed. Check. Stage 5. Social decay. Trust in institutions is near record lows. Crime is rising. Homeless encampments spread through major cities. Drug overdoses kill around 100,000 Americans each year. Top talent is leaving, disengaging, or opting out. Birth rates are falling below replacement. Politics is pure deadlock. We can't agree on anything, can't repair anything, can't build anything. The signs of decline are everywhere, but the official story insists everything is fine. It isn't fine. Check. We are at stage 5 of 7. The Soviet Union reached stage 5 before it disintegrated. So did Britain. Spain lasted longer, but the structure was the same. We're not at the final step, but we are far along the path. Stage 6 is the loss of reserve currency status. That's when allies begin to diversify, when global trade shifts into other units of account, when dollars come back home because the rest of the world no longer needs to hold them. We're seeing the early indicators. BRICS countries building alternatives, central banks stacking gold. China and Russia settle trade in yuan and rubles. Saudi Arabia accepts yuan for oil. The first cracks are showing. Stage 7 is collapse. Not a slow fade, a break. The Soviet Union went from superpower to dissolution in roughly 900 days. Britain lost its empire in about 20 years. Spain took longer. The final picture was the same. Once the reserve currency fails, once the debt load is unpayable, once the military can't be funded, the decline isn't graceful. It is fast and violent. And everyone who believed it can't happen here learns the same lesson every empire learns. It can. It does. 3 empires have already walked this sequence: Spain, Britain, the USSR. Each considered itself unique. Each believed the rules didn't apply. Each told itself comforting stories. All 3 were wrong. We're repeating the same script. We tell ourselves we're different. We have technology. We have the dollar. We're America. But the pattern doesn't care about slogans. The pattern is arithmetic. You cannot live beyond your means forever. You cannot maintain an empire without a real productive base. You cannot hollow out your currency without consequences. You do not get to skip stages 6 and 7 once you've completed 1 through 5. The sequence is locked. The only unknown is timing. Maybe 10 years, maybe 5, maybe less. The pattern points one way, toward collapse. And when it hits, it won't unfold gently. It will be sudden. A currency crisis that triggers a debt crisis, that triggers a political crisis. In a short window, the superpower becomes a warning. The global reserve becomes a regional currency. The empire becomes a story told in classrooms. It has happened 3 times already. The pattern says we're next. Since 2020, we've accelerated every part of the cycle. More printing, more debt, more overseas commitments, more erosion of industry, more internal fracture. We're not walking the road anymore. We're sprinting down it. And if you understand the pattern, you can see the end point from here. Maybe we'll find a way to reverse it. Maybe America will manage what Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union could not. Maybe we'll reform, rebuild, and pull back. Maybe this time really is different. But the pattern argues otherwise. The numbers argue otherwise. And history, which has watched empires die the same way again and again, suggests we're about to learn the lesson the hard way. If this changed how you see where we are in the sequence, subscribe. Because when we hit stages 6 and 7, you're going to want to understand what happened and why. The answers aren't in the future, they're in the past. And I'll show you where to look.